1. So, start of December, I was let go from my job because they didn't have the time to train me for the job role. I needed to take out a loan to survive, as it took me 3 weeks to find something new. I was hired for a customer services administrator role, and as I'd never done that kind of work, I was told I'd be given full training on job. The girls in the office never bothered, and I simply learned the job myself. I was told my performance was more than they expected, but suddenly I was called in the office at 8:30 a.m. when I arrived, and they told me they were really sorry, but they didn't have the time to train me, so I would be let go immediately with no warning or notice. I was completely shocked by this. To add, my contract stated I was to be given 28 days' notice of termination. The company I worked for uses government grants as a form of payment, so they would regularly claim they have done certain things they haven't to make more profits from the government, such as forging signatures and lying about what work they've done to gain more funding. Basically, we get funding from the government for providing services for lower-income customers, that's all I can say. I was involved in a different department, but shared an office with the department responsible for lying about profits. It's a small company, and the director would constantly hassle them to forge signatures, as we can get the jobs through quicker, and if we had an audit, he would go to prison for what was being done. So, when I got laid off, not by a manager, but by someone who worked the same level in my department, I was absolutely livid they dragged me on a 60 to 80-minute drive for me to leave 2 minutes later. I got home and immediately called the fraud whistleblowers helpline. Nothing came of this until a week later when they wanted more details. The thing is, I'm very good at being silent and taking in my surroundings. I was able to tell them which accounts had been forged and lied about. I also had considerable email evidence of what had been going on. So, long story short, majority have lost their jobs, including the people who couldn't be bothered to train me, and went running to the director to fire me. Including the director, who is now being investigated for fraud and facing time in prison and a massive fine. Always live by the mantra, fuck about and find out. 2. Here we have a story from high school. An instance where I thought I was getting PettyRevenge, but I ended getting PettyRevenged upon. Back in high school, like at many schools that happened to have rowing teams, I was targeted for the coxswain job, due to my height and weight. To be fair, I was correctly targeted. My 9th grade self came in at a whopping 105 pounds and maybe 5'2". For those that have participated in the sport of rowing, you'll know that for some reason there is always a shortage of coxswains. Size, weight, interest, competence, you name it, us boat jockeys like to hide. A team may think they've stumbled upon the Holy Grail, finding that lucky guy or gal that fits the proportions of that skinny coxswain seat. But then bam! That Holy Grail turns out to have absolutely zero spatial awareness, steering skills, or wakefulness. True story. A coxswain once fell asleep and crashed a boat straight into shore. Oops. For those not initiated into the sport of rowing, the coxswain's job is to steer the boat using 2 ropes, push the one on the right up, boat moves to starboard, and vice versa. Alongside steering, the coxswain has to be able to effectively communicate with the coach once in practice. Example, coach says, "Hey, 3-seat is sloppy on the oar blade. Coxswain, fix it." Strategize on the fly during the race. Okay, we're sitting up half a boat length on the competition. Should I call a move now, or just wait a bit longer? Save the energy? Ah, fuck it. Let's put those fuckers in the ground behind us. Open water or nothing. On this stroke, go. And general motivation throughout. Usually, all of this would take place in an 8-man boat called the 8+ or the Plus, meaning an 8-person boat plus coxswain. The 8+s are what you see in Olympics, Henley Royal Regatta, and anything to do with the Ivy League. The Winklevoss twins. Fun fact. You know what the first intercollegiate sporting event was in America? Rowing. Harvard versus Yale, who else? Also, no one says, "I roll crew," FYI. Enough with the introduction. It's story time. My high school team was, for the lack of a better word, bad. I once heard someone say that we lost by aircraft carrier distances, or, well, that was certainly a horizon job by the Fighting Mongoose competition. Needless to say, this made the coach none too happy. And I don't blame them. It's tough wrangling a bunch of high school boys in one of the most technically involved sports high schools compete in. Sometimes good technique in a boat with less brawn will totally annihilate a boat with brawn and bad technique. All of this goes to say I would not want to be a high school rowing coach due to the level of teaching required and general equipment upkeep. And that does not even include child management skills, which, let's be honest, even a Wall Street MD would have a hard time. Oh no, please fix that. Didn't work on these little Lord of the Flies bastards. The coach would always stress to the team's coxswain core the importance of having a watch, which, after having coxed at a varsity level in college, I totally agree with. Even as a stupid ignoramus of a 9th grader, I still kinda agreed with that sentiment. The watch would be used to time pieces in practice. Say we're doing 3 10-minute pieces, changing rates throughout, etc. It's important for the coxswain to keep track and call the changes at the right moment. 9th grade me, with an ego inflated in a way that only a petty high schooler could have, decided not to invest in a good watch. Instead, I usually relied on the cox box. Yeah, you heard that right. It's a piece of equipment that plugs into the boat's speaker system, tracks stroke rate, strokes per minute, and has rudimentary timekeeping functions. Well, like most pieces of expensive and specialized equipment, the cox box didn't always work as intended, hence having a watch as a backup. Some days I had my watch in my go bag. Other days, I definitely left it in my mom's car or in my bedroom. Whatever, I could make it work, right? Well, you see, after having forgotten my watch a couple of times, when the damn cox box decided not to work, I got chewed out. R. Lee Emery style. Punishment? Suicides by the dozen. But hey, at least I was an in-shape little asshole, right? One day the coach had had enough. I got screamed at mid-practice for not calling rate changes correctly. And I didn't have my cheap Amazon-bought digital watch on me. Okay, then a light bulb moment. Absolute genius inspiration had struck. I happened to remember my SpongeBob SquarePants trivia, and how at one point Patrick Star sported a drawn-on watch. So what do? I whip out my pen. I was a nerd, I always had a pen on me, and drew myself a god-awful Rolex. My artistic magnum opus, if you will. I then flagged down the coach to tell them that I did, in fact, have my watch after all. Man, I thought I was being clever. You could see the steam coming out of the coach's ears, once they had pulled close enough in their lunch to see my wrist. While I thought I had found an elegant solution well within the spirit of the rule, the coach figured otherwise. Long story short, coach sent the boat back to land to do 1.5 million suicides and jumpies. Everyone in that specific boat got punished, and I found myself benched and on land for a whole week, running laps back at school while everyone else went out to row. I never forgot to watch again, for rowing practice, races at least, including my time as a varsity cox in college. And I still can't figure out how to distance myself from the sport, cult, I mean. 3. This is from a long time ago. It honestly took until adulthood to realize exactly how messed up the whole situation was, but here we are. Back in 4th grade, I had a student teacher who taught on Wednesdays. I guess she was near the end of her practicum because our regular teacher was not there to supervise. The teacher, Mrs. D, despised me, mainly because I never completed my homework. I paid attention in class, stayed on task, but never could bring myself to complete homework. So one day in class, we're working on our math assignment, and Mrs. D loudly calls my name. Everyone goes quiet and watches. In front of everyone, she accused me of stealing my classmate's ruler. Her proof was that my cheap-ass wooden ruler from Zeller's that everyone had looked just like the one he'd lost. Naturally, I had not done that, and showed her that my ruler had my name written on it. She let out a big sigh and said, "Well, she's written her name on it now, so there's nothing I can do." Messed up thing number 1. After that, we all get back to work, and this girl I didn't like started telling everyone at her table that she'd seen me steal the ruler. Which again did not happen. I did what any good 4th grader does when being bullied. I went to Mrs. D to complain about the other girl gossiping about me. She looked at me and said, "Nobody likes a tattletale, Yogurt. Now sit down and do your work." Messed up thing number 2. So later that day we have gym, just before lunch, and Mrs. D has the brilliant idea of putting that girl in my group, because de-escalation clearly involves forcing 2 kids who aren't getting along to be in close contact with each other. I essentially said to hell with this and went into the girls' changing room. Mrs. D followed me and ordered me to come out. I told her I would not come out until she apologized for calling me a thief, and until the other girl apologized for calling me a thief. She said, "Sit yourself," and walked out. Gym class was eventually over, and she came back in to say, "Yogurt, we're leaving now." I said I was still waiting for an apology, and she just ignored me and walked out. And it got quiet, really quiet. I poked my head out of the change room, and it was pitch black. I went to the door, but it was locked and it wouldn't open. I had to run across the gym in the dark to the emergency exit to get out of the gym. Unintentionally, or not, she had locked me in and definitely intentionally had turned off the lights. Messed up thing number 3. I ended up seeing the girl first and let all my anger of the situation out on her. It was the only fight I'd ever gotten in at school. But because of that, and due to my age, I wasn't able to articulate what Mrs. D had done, so she never faced any discipline. So on to the PettyRevenge. 2 weeks later, she brought in some cans of 7-Up for a science experiment. As a reward, we all got a shot glass of the stuff. It just so happened that she had 1 can left over, so at the end of the day, when no one was looking, I stole the can and hid it in my coat. I drank it as I walked home, and then threw the can into the ditch afterwards. I don't even like 7-Up, but it tasted so delicious when it was clearly something she was looking forward to having after class. Call me a thief, let someone gossip about me, and lock me in the gym. Well, guess I'll just be a thief then. The best part was the following week when she lectured the class about the stolen 7-Up and went on about how we could no longer be trusted. Fuck you, Mrs. D. 4. Not me, but an older guy at my work, Larry. Larry is an excellent detail person and organizer at my work. I don't think he tries, it's just his personality. Now, Larry loves his cars. I don't know anyone else who drives half an hour from home and details his vehicle every day. One day in 2018 or so, he made an appointment at a dealership close to work. Dealership number 1, to have his oil changed on his daily driver luxury car. He has another one of the exact same make and model in storage for nice days. They gave him a loaner car to drive until it was done. Think early 2000s minivan with dealership decals on the side. He got a call later on saying that they had to send his car down the road to a different flavored dealership, dealership 2, to get the oil changed because they didn't have the right tools. Weird, but okay. Soon after, he got a call telling him his car was done and he could pick up the car at any time, and that the keys were in it. When he left work, he drove over to the dealership he dropped his car off at. It wasn't there. He called them, and they said it had been left at dealership 2, so he drove over there. There was his car. He could see his keys on the seat. But the car was locked. He called dealership 1 and told them this situation. They told him that the people at dealership 2 had gone home, and there was nothing they could do. To add insult to injury, they tried to joke with him about this situation. That went over none too well. There was one thing Larry could do. Spend half an hour driving back home to get the spare key, and drive half an hour back to pick up his car. Fuming about the lack of professionalism he experienced from dealership 1, he had an entire hour to plan revenge to teach them a lesson. Larry went to dealership 2, dropped off his loaner car from dealership 1 there, locked the keys in the car, unlocked his car, and drove home for the second time that day. So dealership 2 would come into work in the morning and wonder why a loaner car from dealership 1 is in their lot, and call them over to pick it up. When dealership 1 sent someone over there, they would discover that the keys were locked in the car, and have to break into their own car or call a locksmith, like they should have done for Larry in the first place. Larry never heard back from dealership 1 about it, and he hasn't and never will go back there. 5. Note this story has several terms and abbreviations that are understood in Mormonism, but are not well understood outside the Mormon Church, so I'll briefly explain. A bishop is the pastor of a congregation. A stake president is in charge of several congregations. He is like an archbishop in the Catholic Church. The church refers to the Mormon Church. TBM equals true believing member, Mormons who fully believe in Mormonism and fully participate. TSCC, the so-called church. Many Mormons like myself consider the Mormon Church to not be a church at all. Instead, the Mormon Church is a cult, an abusive business masquerading as a religion. So we refer to the Mormon Church as a TSCC. Fast offerings are donations to help poor members of your congregation. Tithing is money donated to the Mormon Church, usually 10% of one's gross income. A nuanced member is a Mormon who doesn't fully believe and/or doesn't fully participate, i.e., maybe he doesn't attend church every Sunday, maybe he doesn't pay tithing, etc. Revenge story. In 2017, I was in a catch-22. My disability was so bad that I couldn't work. But because I was not working, I couldn't afford treatment. To his credit, my bishop offered help. This is an exception for him, as he was not a kind man and generally treated us like crap. My bishop said the church would pay for me to get treatment with the end goal of me being healthy enough to work again. Thus, I went to my doctor many times and did several medical tests. After that, my doctor recommended that I see a specialist for further testing. My bishop gave me approval in writing to get the additional tests and said the church would pay for it. My wife and I had donated tens of thousands of dollars to the church over our lifetimes, so I did not feel bad getting financial help from the church. As a result, I was correctly diagnosed for the first time in my life. There's no cure for my disability, but knowing what the problem was, I started taking medication and that greatly helped. And with improved health, I got a job and was working again when we met in his office. You'd think the bishop would be happy with such desirable results, but no. I sent him the bill for the additional tests. We met in his office at church to discuss the matter, and he tells me that he can't pay the bill. He tells me for the first time that he has a spending limit and the medical bill exceeds it. Next, he attacked me and tried to blame the problem on me, saying that I should have consulted him specifically about the most expensive test, a colonoscopy. At this point, the situation was very intense. I felt lied to, deceived, pissed, alarmed, and disappointed. But I was not going to let him mistreat me, walk all over me, gaslight me, and blame me for this. Hell no, jackass, nice try. So I pushed back and confronted him. I told him that I did consult with him beforehand by getting his explicit permission to get the additional tests. I showed him the email he sent me that said this, which included the colonoscopy. And Bishop, you told me that the church would pay for the additional tests. Plus, I was trying to get tests done quickly so I could get a job, which I now have, thanks to this medical help. Furthermore, you should have told me that you had a spending limit. That was your mistake, Bishop, not mine. It would be grossly unfair for our family to pay for your mistake. I was proud of myself for not tolerating his attempt to treat me like shit. To make a long story short, he went to the stake president and the church paid a little more of the medical bill. I was glad, but my wife and I were still stuck paying off a few $1,000s. We got on a payment plan and eventually paid it off. But we didn't stop there. I was still mad about the whole situation and felt like I had been wronged. And paying the bill was a big financial burden. Hence we decided to say fuck you to the church. We would pay ourselves back for the unjust medical bill by limiting church donations. Go to hell, TSCC. Thus, we immediately stopped paying fast offerings, and about 2 years later, in 2019, we stopped paying tithing. That was a much faster way to pay ourselves back. And a few years after that, in 2022, I formally resigned from the church, and despite having paid ourselves back years ago, we still don't give TSCC 1 penny. Yes, that includes my wife, who's still a Mormon. So good job, TSCC, you saved yourself a few $1,000s. But you lost a committed, faithful member, me, turned my formerly TBM wife into a nuanced member, and you lost many thousands of dollars, or future tithes and offerings. It was sure worth it to be cutthroat and cheap with 2 TBMs. What an evil, awful organization. Burn in hell, Mormon Church. That bishop actually died in 2018, about 1 year after the incident. I wasn't jumping for joy about his death, but I was relieved. And get this, my wife was talking to one of her close friends in the congregation. My wife mentioned the bishop's death, and this friend basically accused my wife of being a sociopath. She accused my wife of being happy about his death, and asked her why she brought up his death when you never liked the bishop anyway. Mormons can be so damn oblivious and judgmental. Suffice to say, my wife ended the friendship after that. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 252. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you'd be so good, please hit the like button before you go, just a quick click, and that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video so they'll recommend it to other people. Then I can make more videos. Okay, let's see. No other business, I don't think. Let me check. No other business. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: on clammy days, days when the atmosphere just feels wrong and it feels almost oppressive, what do you do to help yourself get through that? Speaking for myself, I usually like something sweet, and I'll generally put, even if it is kind of chilly, I'll put one of the fans on. So if I'm sitting in the living room in front of the floor fan, that flow of air does help kind of like balance my brain out a little bit, because it is weird the way that, that just the feeling in the air can mess with you. But let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now and make more videos. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.